Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me. This is my second day reading the passages that are most prominent to me from book 29 in my A Book a Week series, Alan Watts' What is Tao? I'm remembering the first book that I read of Alan Watts and the sensations that I felt in reading what he was describing and connecting what he was describing to whispers of understanding that usually felt like remembering when I had them. And I didn't know how to share them with any other human beings because I didn't know exactly how to say it. And every time I tried to, I felt so clumsy that I usually went back into my shell and didn't feel encouraged or reinforced to try to repeat the experience and open what I was describing. From within, though, it continued to bloom because that sensation of remembering felt so right that I continued to go there. It felt good. It felt wonderful. And perhaps it also felt a little bit like the cultivation of a secret within myself, which began to feel like a sanctuary that I could retreat to at any moment. When I found the work of Alan Watts, I felt at once like my secret, my sanctuary, was not just my own. And I felt so relieved to share it. And the satisfaction that I felt in hearing someone say it so eloquently was true recreation. The first of his books that I read was The Wisdom of Insecurity. And I remember reading the title and thinking, that's it. Because the only way that I had come to find, to put into words what I'd felt for so long was by saying, I'm not sure what this is, but somehow I feel that God is present when two polar opposites are true at once. And I would feel it when exercising. I would feel it when I was pushing my body to its limits and feeling the human sensation of struggle and opening myself in a space where I perceived myself to be weak because I could barely handle anymore, and yet knowing that was when I was perhaps most strong. And I remember dealing with and moving through moments that felt very difficult when I was feeling that I was breaking down and I was struggling to connect to a sensation of wholeness. Usually in those moments I wasn't able to express myself and I was crying. And I remember in those moments connecting to the sensation that I was using all of my strength, so I couldn't at once use it and feel that I was it. And I remember beginning to support any loved ones or friends at that time in my life when they were in the moments of the deepest struggle by sharing that. When you are putting all of your strength into use, into motion, into action, it's typically in the moments when you feel the weakest. I also felt it when I was amidst my wedding vows and noting that in honoring the sacred quality of resonance with my fragility that is inevitable in human form, in surrendering to that inevitability, I would be able to connect to the strength in my vows. And I remember on my wedding day wanting nothing more than to allow myself to collapse into that mysterious hammock of fragility, in knowing that that would be just where I would connect to the treasure of my steadiness in my commitment. Now I want to circle this back to early childhood memory in an experience that I had that had nothing to do with words or thought form. The first recollection of the Tao that I can connect to and actually share here, I would spend a lot of time in early childhood just laying down and not really connecting to thoughts, but connecting to this sensation of balance. And I would lay on my bed and put my arm up into the air, and I would sense a place where I could put my arm where it would feel like gravity would pull it one way, and then gravity might pull it another if I put it over here to my left. And then I would sense a space where gravity didn't pull it in either direction to fall, and it would feel that it was pulling it upward toward the sky. And I remember just marveling. It felt like it felt wonderful. It felt like I didn't want to be anywhere else doing anything but that. And I think that was one of my first meditative experiences that I repeated over and over as a child. There is so much magic in the work that Alan Watts left us that can be found in his exploration of paradox. And he plays with words, exploring the magic in paradox in so many different ways. And I really want to today reinforce that in connecting to that magic, that we really cultivate that, because there's so much that we can find there. I'm going to tie that around into my first reading today. I'm on page 62. All the time, we are actually relying on this strange and unintelligible form of natural order. It is at the basis of everything we do, and even when we try to figure something out and describe it in words, and then make a decision on the basis of that process, we are still unconsciously relying upon an order that we cannot figure out. That order constitutes our basic nature, but we are too close to it to see it. And so following the Tao is the art of feeling our way into our own nature. Before I move on to today's vocal readings, I'm going to add one additional thing that makes traditional meditation so incredibly entertaining to me, no matter how much I do it. In fact, more and more entertaining the more I do it. And that is a focus on breath instantaneously. It brings me back to the remembering of one of the basic paradoxes that can be observed in our human nature. And that is, where does the rubber meet the road between who is electing each of my decisions? And the movement of breath is such a wonderful focus point to put under the microscope of this contemplation. Who is doing the breathing? And there's this wonderful sensation that can emerge in focusing on the breath of asking ourselves, am I breathing or am I being breathed? I'm wearing a shirt that reads one of my favorite Alan Watts quotes. Do you breathe or are you breathed? And when I sink into meditation, that is one of the biggest comforts for me, is this sensation that at once I am breathing, and I feel that that is my remembering and my reconnecting to the original universal source of our energy. May we call it God, may we call it Tao. Doesn't really matter what we call it. I'm at once connecting to that in the sensation that I'm being breathed, and connecting to the role that I am playing in human form of Annie Titchener, human body, who is engaging in the wonderful perception of agency, perception of choice, perception of election to breathe. I highly recommend the contemplation of where the rubber meets the road between the voluntary and the involuntary, as that is one of the many magical routes to engagement in the lovely paradox of the experience of the human condition. Without further ado, I will now move on toward today's vocal readings. Enjoy. Page 53. Lao Tzu writes about the philosophy of the strength of weakness. It is a strange thing, I think, how it is men in the West do not realize how much softness is strength. One of old Lao Tzu's favorite analogies was water. He spoke of water as the weakest of all things in the world, and yet there is nothing to be compared with it in overcoming what is hard and strong. You can cut water with a knife, and it lets the knife go right through. Yet water alone cut the Grand Canyon out of solid rock. Relaxed gentleness is most beautifully seen when you watch cats climbing trees. When a cat falls out of a tree, it lets go of itself. The cat becomes completely relaxed and lands lightly on the ground. But if a cat were about to fall out of a tree and suddenly made up its mind that it didn't want to fall, it would become tense and rigid and would be just a bag of broken bones upon landing. In the same way, it is the philosophy of the Tao that we are all falling off a tree at every moment of our lives. As a matter of fact, the moment we were born, we were kicked off a precipice and we are falling, and there's nothing that can stop it. So instead of living in a state of chronic tension and clinging to all sorts of things that are actually falling with us because the whole world is impermanent, be like a cat. Don't resist it. Page 59. One reason life seems problematic to us, and one reason why we look to philosophy to try to clear it all up, is that we've been trying to fit the order of the universe to the order of words. And it simply does not work. Yet, I continue to talk and write about Eastern philosophy, and I have often said that the real basis of Buddhism is not a set of ideas, but an experience. And this, of course, is equally true of Taoism as well, which, like Buddhism, recognizes that experience is altogether something different from words. If you've tasted a certain taste, even the taste of water, you know what it is. But to someone who has not tasted it, it can never be explained in words, because it goes far beyond words. The order of the world is very different from the order we create with the rules of our syntax and grammar. The order of the world is extraordinarily complex, while the order of words is relatively simple. And to use the order of words to try to explain life is really as clumsy an operation as trying to drink water with a fork. Our confusion of the order of logic and of words with the order of nature is what makes everything seem so problematic to us. The order of Li, of the infinite complexity of organic pattern, is also the order of our own bodies and of our brains and nervous systems. We actually live by that order, for as I have often noted, we do not figure out in words or ordered thoughts how we grow our own bodies, structure our bones, or regulate our metabolism. In fact, we really have no idea how we manage to do any of this. No idea how we manage to be conscious, how we actually think, and how we actually make decisions. We do these things, but the processes and the order of the physical body that underlies them are completely mysterious to us. Even though we can do these things, we cannot fully describe them. Since we are brought up to make sense of ourselves and to be able to account for ourselves, we are always expected to be able to rationalize our actions and words. When we try to accomplish this, we develop a kind of second self inside us, which in Zen is called the observing self. This observing self can be a very good thing for us to develop, and it can also cause problems and run a commentary on who we are and what we are doing all the time. It asks, what will other people say? Am I being proper? Does what I'm doing make any sense? I'm on page 65, and this will be the final passage that I read today. We've all admired the spontaneity and freshness of children, and it is regrettable that as children are brought up, they become more and more self-conscious. In this way, people often lose their freshness, and more human beings seem to be turned into creatures calculated to get in their own way. Humans get in their own way because they're always observing and questioning themselves. They're always trying to fit the order of the world into the order of sense, the order of thoughts and words. Therefore, the children lose their naturalness and spontaneity. For this reason, we admire the people, whether they be sages or artists, who have the ability to return in their mature life to a kind of childlikeness and freshness. They are not bothered anymore by what people are thinking or saying. This is the charm that surrounds the Taoist sages of ancient China.